folks? Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick. It's time for this week's One Last Thing with co-host Slava Cooperstein. Slava, how you doing?
I mean, what can you say after what I think is probably the greatest bye week for the Ravens in all of history? I think you'd have to do a lot of research to find one better than this. So I feel great. How about you?
So many positive things about how the Ravens came out of this, obviously, what they're looking like. I think it's some of it manifests himself in a huge uptick in their chance to get the number one seed in the AFC. We'll talk through how some of that occurred, but we just were talking a little bit about the production meeting. One of the great things about this is, first of all, it's a bye week. And that's where the starting point. We get to watch these other teams beat each other up while the Ravens have a chance to get healthy themselves. A couple key injuries coming back in Madubuike and Humphrey.
Yeah, I mean, I think you pointed out something that I thought it was just hilarious, is that, all of these happened in different time slots. So you, like, I didn't even think about it, but yeah, we got to watch game after game just, go our way. And they were actually, like, incidentally, they were very entertaining games as well. So, high drama that all ended in our favor over the course of the week.
So let's start with that first game. And obviously the Ravens watching the Pittsburgh Steelers at home versus the 2-10 Arizona Cardinals. Stumble around. Kenny Pickett injured in the game. Mitch Trubisky came in. You and I were talking a little bit about this, about just how much of an upgrade Pickett is over Trubisky. I think the margin is actually relatively small relative to the other quarterbacks in the AFC. Obviously, yeah. Pickett's not among the great quarterbacks, so, losing him means less to the Steelers. But that loss by the Steelers has got to be one of the worst in team history in terms of letting a team come into their house and beat the living snot out of them.
Yeah, I'm not necessarily shocked that the Cardinals beat the Steelers. I do think that. So first of all, the Cardinals team that we played, right, didn't have Kyler Murray, who's certainly an upgrade over Josh Dobbs. But, to do it in that fashion, I mean, the game didn't even seem like 24-10 didn't feel that close. For all intents and purposes, it really was a 24-3 type of, beat down. And that was pretty surprising, given the Steelers' ability to keep games close throughout the year has been to their strength.
Yeah, I'm looking for what the spread was on the game. Oh, wait, here's something. Yeah, the Steelers were 6.5-point favorites. That's obviously a game you don't want to lose. Probably have pretty close to a 70% chance to win that game. If you do lose it, you better lose it close to a team like Arizona. And they were down 24-3 late, really did not look particularly good in the game. They got beaten up on the ground, which is something we have not often seen in Pittsburgh Steelers history, them get run over as effectively as they were in this game. And just a great 1:00 game as the appetizer to a fine couple of days of football.
Yeah, absolutely. I think maybe the, chickens have come home to roost at this point for the Steelers. A long season of just offensive inefficiency and impotence wears down defense over the course of the season. And maybe that's what we're seeing at this point. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, it's a great point about Pittsburgh is that, they're playing with smoke and mirrors in terms of that 7-5 record. They've been outscored on the year by 37 points and they're 7-5. And that shouldn't happen, but they've constantly been snatching, victory from the jaws of defeat, right? That's the way it goes. In the fourth quarter of these games, and just remarkable in that respect. But this is, I think we're going to see the Steelers come back down to earth the rest of the way. One of my significant hopes is that they don't have anything that they're playing for in Week 18. And I think with the current situation, even with their easy schedule, they're going to have to play pretty well to be playing for something in Week 18.
Yeah, one of the things that I think is kind of necessary for us to discuss over the course of these games, these games have resulted in some serious injuries, and as Ravens fans over the past couple of years, and also going back to 2015, I think with Joe Flacco tearing his ACL, we've seen seasons derailed by injury, in particular to the quarterback, and it absolutely sucks. But it's part of the game, and it's part of assessing what these teams' chances are going to be. And it's a part of it. And so Kenny Pickett is going to be out for a few weeks. So they say he's going to come back, against us, but who knows how effective he'll be. I think it was his thumb.
Actually, I don't know. I thought he was on his ankle as well, down by the goal line, and having trouble getting up off the ground. But it might have been an injury to another part of his body.
Yeah, I'll check on that.
Okay.
Oh no, actually, yeah, I don't know where I got. Yeah, he had surgery today on his high ankle sprain. I don't know. Somebody else must have had something to happen to their thumb, because it was something this week, but who knows?
All right. Well, let's move on to that 4:00 time slot where the Cleveland Browns, as bad as they've been in some respects, it's offensively,
sure,
we're scary as hell coming into this week with Joe Flacco at quarterback, and to watch Joe Flacco take them down the field on that first drive really had me concerned about their ability to put together a legitimate playoff push. I mean, the division is not locked up for the Ravens at this point. In fact, the DeVoe playoff odds, and we'll talk about them a little later, have them at about a 10% chance still to lose the division. So I was legitimately concerned over how efficient Flacco looked moving him down the field on that first drive.
Yeah, I mean, the Browns are one of these teams that they have a lot of pieces in place, and Joe is certainly a competent quarterback, and I think that it was an enticing offer for him to come back and play for the Browns in particular, because they've got a good offensive line, right? He's not going to be running for his life or anything like that. And 2 touchdowns, 1 interception, pretty solid game. Looked good at times. But obviously this is somebody who hasn't played any football this year. I think it is really tremendous for the Ravens that the Rams eked out this. Well, not eked out. They it's the 36-19 is pretty solid win. But for a while it was pretty back and forth.
Yep.
So it was pretty important to us that they dropped this one.
Yeah, very nice to see Myles Garrett get shut down and not look like much in this game. I was a little surprised he was back. His arm was in a sling the previous week, but he didn't in this game. He didn't have any tackles, and he didn't have any sacks. Obviously, I don't know how he did in terms of pressure, but it wasn't a lot in terms of him getting in on the quarterback. So hopefully, Garrett's a little bit less than the player he was early in the season, because he certainly has been very dominant. So anyway, that takes us through that 4:00 game where we've got the win. And then you're thinking, well, I know I am. The worst we can do is what's happened so far, but we could get really greedy and hope the Packers can somehow beat the Chiefs at Lambeau Field in the night game.
Yeah, to me, this is easily the most surprising victory. I thought that the Kansas City Chiefs matched up pretty well against the Packers just going into it, just because the Packers haven't shown too much offensively this year, at least in the games of theirs that I've watched or incidentally followed some stats through, playing fantasy or anything like that, and Jordan Love looked probably the best that I've seen him this entire year. Looked pretty competent and efficient operating that offense. And, talking about chickens coming home to roost, I mean, the Kansas City defense has been carrying that team all year. Doesn't seem like Travis Kelce's quite right. And, their receiving core, Kansas City's receiving core from the beginning of the season wasn't really scaring anybody. And even with Rashee Rice, kind of emerging as somebody who you think, okay, this could be a player. It's very rare that a rookie receiver is going to have major impact on a team, and rarer still that they're going to do a whole lot for you in the playoffs. And they have so little around him. So this was huge, particularly in terms of the overall AFC seeding.
Mm-hmm. Love having a pretty darn good year overall this year. Like 25 and 13, touchdowns and interceptions. But his rating is right up there. He's had a lot of 100 plus rating games. He's got about 3,500 yards right now too, which I think puts him significantly ahead of Jackson. But I have to really look on that. But anyway, he's he's a better quarterback than I thought was going to happen right away in his first very significant playing time here. But anyway, the Packers played it tight the entire way, and even though they kind of let Kansas City hang in the game in some ways that were uncomfortable as a viewer, they came down with 3 chances to win on that last drive. They needed to get a stop. They needed to get a 2-point conversion stop, or they needed to return fire and win it in regulation after that, or in overtime, either one. And they didn't need to go to number 2 or number 3. They got the interception right, ended that last drive for Kansas City.
I think that's right. I'd have to look back at it, but no, it was definitely a nail biter at times.
Yeah. So we move on to Monday then, and Jacksonville and Cincinnati. It's just, it would be so greedy of us to expect a win now, or hope for a win even, but sure enough, once you got 3 in the bag, you want 4. You want a 4-game sweep instead of a 3-1 record after that, and that Cincinnati performance was really something else. Just setting aside the injury now to Lawrence, which is obviously it's horrible for the Jaguars. He may or may not be back in time for the playoffs. They probably, in my opinion, will not win the division now with Houston coming on. I mean, there's definitely a risk that they lose it either to Houston or Indianapolis, which really that changes the AFC playoff picture a lot right there.
Sure, yeah, big time.
And then, Jake Browning was just unbelievable in terms of what he did on Monday night. I thought also the other guy who really came on to have a fantastic game was Jamar Chase, who's been up and down this year, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely a vintage Jamar Chase performance. There was a funny statistic about number of the list of players who have made 85% of their completions and made X number of throws, and it's a very, very short list. It's like Drew Brees did it twice. Some of the other greats did it. Lamar did it against the Colts, in that game where he had that furious comeback. And then you got Jake Browning in there. And everybody was having their fun talking about quarterback controversy in Cincinnati. But no, I mean, it was a great performance by Jake Browning. Not as, I think the big headline for Jacksonville coming out of the game isn't so much this loss as it is the loss of Trevor Lawrence over the next couple of weeks, which you alluded to, because I think that's going to have a much bigger impact, on everything else, because they, like you said, they've got Houston breathing down their necks. But I found myself watching that game and kind of being envious at how efficient and sort of uncomplicated the offensive performance was by the Cincinnati Bengals. It's funny, the 2 times they really screwed themselves out of continued success on a drive, or 2 gadget plays, one of which resulted in a disastrous interception on a pass by Tyler Boyd. They single-handedly put the Jags back in the game on that trick play. And kind of makes me wonder, whether the Ravens, are looking at that and maybe paying attention to it, because I think the Ravens have some adjustments to do on offense. We've been talking about it, and you've been talking about it throughout, the past couple of weeks. Offensive line's a problem. Absence of Mark Andrews a problem. The Ravens really just need to kind of take stock of what they need to do to kind of have sustained success on drives. Maybe not the most explosive offense, but a successful one that's converting on third down, converting on these key possessions.
I mean, one of the things, looking at what's happening around the AFC North, but around the NFL in general, the Ravens need to make sure that they keep Lamar uninjured the rest of the season. It's the key to everything. if Lamar is hurt, obviously it's going to be bad. And unfortunately, with the tackle play, they've had to give their tackles a lot of help. It's been very necessary, and I think they've got to try and figure out if Ronnie Stanley can get him to the finish line here. I am really concerned, obviously, about his play. We saw Walker Little basically get backed up into Trevor Lawrence and basically end the Jaguars season in a lot of ways. And Stanley gave up 5.5 pressures that looked an awful lot like that one in this last game for the Ravens played against the Chargers. So yeah, I don't think the Ravens are out of the woods in any stretch in terms of Jackson's injury, and they face some tough pass rushing opponents that certainly are going to give Stanley some problems, I think, down the stretch.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in the week, you or one of your guests mentioned, rolling pockets to the right a little bit. I think that is definitely something that they need to bring back just to kind of help Ronnie in that way, use Lamar's mobility in that way, and also he's very dangerous when it comes to a rolling pocket and then seeing a lane and just taking off and going for it. No, just like you said, what happened to Trevor Lawrence? I mean, literally, we watched that same thing happen to Lamar on at least 2 plays this season, and he miraculously, came away relatively unscathed.
Yeah. Yeah. Lamar is certainly playing through some nagging injuries right now. So, very big deal. Any concern over Cincinnati reemerging as a playoff threat?
Not at this point. I just think the talent deficit on offense, in particular at the quarterback position, even though Jake Browning played a great game, I think it's too great, and their record is what it is at this point. They'd pretty much have to run the table to even have a shot, and the Ravens would have to lose quite a bit for them to come into it.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lose the division. I mean, Cincinnati, a pretty darn good shot at a wild card right now.
Sure.
Would we rather have them in than Buffalo? I think my answer would be yes.
100%. Even though Buffalo is having some troubles right now, having a guy like Josh Allen, having a guy like Diggs, those guys can go off on any particular game and your season can be over in a single play. Those guys are juggernauts. The Ravens know how to play the Bengals. All due respect to the Jags, but we're not the Jags.
All right. Well, fair enough. And that will be an interesting wild card race in the AFC. And I think the AFC South race just got a hell of a lot more interesting. The AFC West race remains uninteresting, as does the AFC East race. I think Miami has gotten that much closer to wrapping that thing up for good, although Buffalo's still hanging in there. But one thing we want to talk about is, what do the Ravens really need to do to get the 1 seed at this point? And you can look at multiple different sites, but if any site that doesn't have the Ravens to be the favorite to win the 1 seed right now is probably, I want to inspect the model a little more closely.
Yeah, I mean, I always think back to the
Aaron Rodgers' season is officially over, but yours has just begun at MyBookie. NFL, college ball, and a brand new cash-out system gives you options to bet and win all season long. First 2 legs of your parlay hit, cash out early and place another bet, or let it ride for a chance at an even bigger payday. Join us at MyBookie for an entire season filled with daily odd boost, same-game parlays, and huge prize pool contests. Right now, MyBookie has a no-strings-attached cash bonus that lets you deposit and withdraw quick. Use the promo code RAVENS on your first deposit of $50 or more, and you can receive up to $200 in cash instantly credited to your MyBookie account. That's promo code RAVENS to claim your cash bonus now. You can bet anything, anytime, anywhere, only with MyBookie.
Articles from the Sun that would come out this time of year where they'd go to Ray Lewis for a quote, and he'd say, we're in control of our own destiny, and that's the best you can hope for. And we are fortunately in that position, despite having dropped, at least 2 games that we definitely shouldn't have. earlier in the season. So, like I've said before, happens to every team. Kansas City really shouldn't have dropped that game to the Packers, but they did, and now we're in the driver's seat. So, it's still a tall order to win out, but I think it's going to be a tall order for everybody, even though our schedule's the hardest.
Right. Well, that's where we are right now. I mean, the old song, a little help from my friends. Every team in the AFC except for the Ravens needs a little help from their friends. And the Ravens can win 5 out of 5. It's not a high percentage chance, but with the injury to Lawrence, I'd put it at about 8%. It's if you just work out from the money line what those odds are on a per game basis, that's what I come out to. And then that's not their most likely path by any stretch at all. Their most likely path is to win 4 out of 5.
Yeah.
And then they have a lot of different ways they can get in that way. And let's just talk through that a little bit. Obviously, if they win all 5, they got it. If they win 4 out of 5, they need a couple things to happen. They need wins to occur over Jacksonville and Miami. And I'm going to get to a second one where I don't think they necessarily have to beat Jacksonville. They absolutely must beat Miami. Absolutely must win that game. That is the must-win of must-win games in the remainder of their schedule. That San Francisco game, a litmus test, I think we would agree.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the rest of the season, a litmus test, I think we would agree. But the San Francisco game is a game they can afford to lose. The Rams game, they can't really afford to lose it because it's one of their high probabilities to win.
Right.
But the San Francisco game on the road on Christmas night, that's about as hard as it gets. And that'll be a very tough win for them. Then we move on, and if as long as they meet Miami and win 4 to 5 exactly, then all they need is one more loss by Kansas City. Now, a lot of people are saying, ain't no way Kansas City's losing one more game. Well, I'm telling you what, Kansas City's got 5 football games to play, and one of them is against Buffalo, even though it's at home. They are no kind of sure thing, and in fact, they're much more likely to lose one or more games than to run the table themselves.
Yeah, I agree. It's very tough to win, 5 games, in a row and run the table at this stage in the season, particularly given that, so many teams are playing for their own playoff seeding. Mm-hmm. And I do think I think us winning 4 out of 5 is probably the most likely, just looking at the games with the probable loss coming at the 49ers.
Right. All right. Well, then the additional pickup, and it's just an extra permutation of this, but it's not insignificant in terms of percentage chance. If they can win the game at the 49ers, and there'll be a slight dog in that game, probably a 30% chance or 35% chance to win that game. But then they could afford probably to lose the Jacksonville game. I don't think it's highly likely that they lose that, but I also think it's likely Jacksonville loses at least one other game, which is what it would then take to get the Ravens back to the number 1 seed. So that additional permutation is a nice advantage for this Ravens team to get going, because the Jacksonville game is a road game. The Miami game is at home. Hopefully it'll be some really lousy weather that will give Tua some trouble. And the Ravens can, put out a defensive effort it's at or near the top tier that they've done this year to try and slow down that Miami passing attack.
Yeah, I mean, I think we match up with Miami probably in terms of the way that we scheme our defense, probably as good or better than any other team in the league. Mm-hmm. In terms of how we really are taking away the deep ball. It is, tackling discipline and lane integrity are so important in that game because of the speed that they're going to have coming out of the backfield, and just knowing that it is possible on any given play for Tyreek Hill and Jalen Waddle to get behind a defender, just being very aware of that. I think honestly the game will be won or lost up front with our ability to get pressure on Tua. I think I don't think he's going to respond particularly well to that. Yeah,
that's certainly a good possibility. If you look at who Miami has beaten and who they've lost to, Their resume is not particularly impressive. They're like a college football team with a 9-3 record that's beaten a bunch of Sun Belt teams or lesser teams. I don't want to pick on any one conference, but that's a good example. If you're an SEC team and you beat a lot of Sun Belt teams, and they've lost some of the bigger games on their schedule to the tougher opponents. So Miami will have their hands full with the Ravens, I believe. And the thing that I think is going to bother Tua is him continually facing zone defense and eyes on the football. I think in general that should work well in terms of rallying to the ball and dealing with some of their speed, but it also should force the game underneath, and that's just not where Tua is necessarily comfortable. So his guys will have to make plays after they get the ball in their hands. I don't think they will try some, I don't doubt, but I don't think they're going to be trying all game to throw the ball deep to Tyreek Hill. I don't see that as being something you necessarily even try to do against the Ravens' 2 deep looks.
Yeah, I mean, if he tries that more than a couple times, I think that he will. We will reap the rewards. I'll put it that way.
All right. It is not impossible that the Ravens can get in with 3-2. By the way, that would take quite a lot. Kansas City would have to lose 2 ball games. They'd have to have the division would not be secure in that case because obviously you'd have to. Either the Browns or the Browns and the Steelers would each have to lose a game to make that happen. I guess if they beat both Jackson and Miami, they'd be in an excellent position, but Miami would have to lose another game as well. So it'd be tough to get in at 3-2, but it's possible they'd be 3-1 after these 4 games, already have it locked up, and decide they want to bench some players for that final game against Pittsburgh. Would really be nice. And this is going to be what's big about that Christmas game is if they're in a position where beating San Francisco allows them to rest a lot of players in week 18 would be a very big benefit for the Ravens going into the playoffs.
Huge. Absolutely huge. And just, the Niners, I think, will test a lot of the weaknesses that the Ravens are currently showing offensively, just with how potent that pass rush is, and I think that they'll learn a lot about where they stand in a lot of different ways. So you definitely want them to come out there and really kind of lay it all out there to show. Let themselves know, like, okay, where do we stand and where do we need to get, with these playoffs looming. So it'll certainly be an interesting game.
Yeah. And we remember in 2019 what, the litmus test it was that time to beat the 49ers 20-17, to basically put the game away with a 6-minute field goal drive at the end, which was really impressive in the rain. And it was that was really one of the highlights of that 2019 season. The game at Seattle was great. That game was great. But that was and Miami, of course, but the Rams, a lot of highlights that year, honestly.
Yeah, for sure.
But the San Francisco game was one of the big ones in terms of beating a really good football team. What did I want to ask you? Because I had one more question about this, and I might have forgotten it. But
well, I got one for you. In the meantime, which of these AFC losses do you think is the biggest for the Ravens?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt about it. It's the Colts. I mean, that's a game that if they had it right now, they'd be in a better position in wild card tiebreakers. And so their conference record would be good, and they'd be in a lot of good position to win some 3-way tiebreakers as now they are not. So anyway, the Colts game, obviously losing that game was very costly. We knew it at the time. Yep. But yeah, the Ravens would certainly be in a position where I think 4-1 would do it no matter what if they had beaten the Colts, and it might even be that they'd be in very good shape at 3-2. They need a Kansas City loss, obviously, but they'd be in good shape at 3-2.
And then how about the which loss this past weekend during the bye week do you think was the biggest for the Ravens?
Okay, the biggest for the Ravens. Yeah, I mean the biggest obstacle to them getting the 1 seed was the Kansas City Chiefs losing 2 football games the rest of the year, and they got one of them in Green Bay. I can't. None of the others are above that. Cleveland and Pittsburgh, I have some confidence that they were going to lose anyway. And I Jacksonville, at least the Ravens, were going to be able to play them and beat them and put them in a big hole.
Yep.
And now, that is it's icing on the cake. There's so much icing on this cake; it's really hard to pick. It's
might be more icing than cake.
Yeah. But yeah, that's where I would go. How about you?
No, I agree completely. I mean, I do think the Browns losing is significant. In particular, if Flacco turns out to be something of a catalyst for the team, because they certainly did look better with him, under center than any of the other remaining options. And this sort of puts a nail in the coffin, I think, a little bit.
One of the things that comes up, I remember my question is, do you abide any of the talk where the Ravens should not want the 1 seed because of the extra bye week and possible 2 weeks of byes, if you're really talking about the Steelers? Now, this happened in 2019, and they played the Steelers in week 18, and they looked fantastic doing it, by the way, beating them up with Justice Hill and a bunch of backups with RG3 at quarterback.
Sure.
And Lamar Jackson taking off. Then they had a bye week, and then Lamar came back after 2 weeks off and was not as good, despite a impressive statistical game in some ways against Tennessee.
Well, I think there are a couple parts to this question. First of all, you always want the number 1 seed. You always want the bye. This is just like PTSD Ravens talk, going back to 2006 with us, losing to the Colts, at home.
That was as the 2 seed, but yes.
Well, yeah, but I mean, just having
I agree on the bye.
That was back when you had the 2 seed did get a bye week, right? Mm-hmm. And we were hosting, and then we lost, and they're like, well, when we won the Super Bowl the first time, we did all the games on the road, and therefore it's better. It's like, well, no, it's not better. It's just there. There have been some unfortunate games in the Ravens' history where it didn't pan out. So I completely disagree with that line of thinking. Number one. Number two, I do think there's something to like having like 2 weeks of no football is not great. But if you go back and watch that Tennessee game, there's so many times where Lamar put the the ball on the money, and it was clanging off the hands of Mark Andrews and every other receiver, and and so so much went wrong in that game. It was just like a cavalcade of sadness.
Yes.
So I do think that taking 2 weeks completely off is there's probably a little bit of disruption to the rhythm. What I probably would have done was split the difference a little bit and have Lamar play like the first quarter of the Steelers game, just to kind of like let's get our reps in or whatever, and then get him out of there.
Can you imagine the backlash if Lamar had gotten hurt in that first quarter against the Steelers? Can you imagine? Yeah,
fear of failure is a good driver in preparation. It's not a good driver for your decision making. I think you try to make the best decision with the information that you have at hand. I hate to bring up J.K. Dobbins' horrible run of bad luck, but he played in the preseason, got injured in the preseason. He didn't play in the next, the next time that he was available in the preseason, got injured that first game of that season. Mm-hmm. Injuries happen; it's part of the game, and they can happen at any given time. I don't think you need to court disaster, but if there is a benefit to be gained from, choosing your course of action, and you're not just playing just to say that he. You're trying to run up his number of consecutive starts or whatever, then do what you think is the best.
That would be my fear, of course, is that, Jackson would, and that would be my biggest fear would be that he gets injured. My second fear is your scripted plays are scripted to avoid that injury. And so you run, quick out pass, run, quick out pass. And, you don't have any, you don't run your normal offense. So you might as well have had a bye week anyway. Yeah. In terms of some of that stuff. And I've seen the other quarterbacks do that. Peyton Manning, one time when the Ravens really needed him to win a game in the final week of the season for the Ravens to potentially get in, came in, took 3 snaps, handoff, short pass, and was out of there and hit the bench because the Colts had wrapped up their seating. Frustrating as hell, by the way, for that to happen. But it was what it was. And I will say this: there's a bunch of teams. I'll give this data point for starters. is it's not all about the Ravens. So there's a whole lot of Ravens fans who are upset that the Ravens lost in 2019, and they want to project that out for the rest of eternity, that the Ravens are never going to win a game when they have a bye. But take a look at the Chiefs on the other hand. So the Chiefs at home in their history are 11-10. When they're at home with Mahomes, they're 9-2. On the road in the playoffs, which is where the Ravens would get them, they are 2-9 in their history. And on the road with Mahomes, very important factor here, they are 0-0. So Mahomes has never played a road playoff game. We know he's a bitch to handle in Arrowhead. I mean, it does not make any sense to inflict that upon yourself when whoever they get is going to be the lowest remaining seed. Yeah, that could be Buffalo, playing them at home again in that bye game, but I don't think you can rely on that to be the reason you got it, because it also could be the Texans, it could be the Colts winning a playoff game, it could be Pittsburgh or Cleveland winning a playoff game, because basically the four teams I just named, the Colts, the Texans, the Steelers, and the Browns, three of those teams are likely to make it unless Cincinnati takes a spot or Buffalo takes a spot. I mean, it's just the field in the AFC is not that good at the bottom. So
you definitely, I mean, you definitely want the opportunity to host. You definitely want the Ravens could definitely use any kind of bye week, any kind of time to rest. I mean, it's the one seed has never been more important than it is now. And, given that only one team is now getting a bye, and this is exactly what the Patriots' entire operation was based on, right? Like they said, we don't want to be playing wild card weekend.
Yep.
We need to get that bye week, because then you just got to win 2 games to make it to the dance. Winning 3 in a row versus 2 in a row, big difference.
We want to play at home in the New England weather against Peyton Manning rather than going to their place. It's just enormous freaking difference in the two places. Playing in a dome, Manning obviously, it's not that Brady isn't a little bit better also, but Brady much more weather resistant than Manning in terms of playing outdoors in his career.
Totally.
All right, outstanding. Always a pleasure doing this show with you, Slava. Tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
I'm on Twitter at Slava Cooperstein. That's SLAVAKUPERSTEIN.
All right, outstanding. Other folks out there who want to be on a film study short, hit me up. I still have time this bye week to record some shows. I'll get back to you right away. DMs are always open on Twitter, and I'll talk to you about what kind of a kernel of an idea you have for a show, but anything you're passionate about. If you have a statistic you want to talk about, if you have an anomaly you want to talk about, if you have a scheme thing, if you want to have a franchise building thing, all those are good topics. So for Slava Cooperstein, this is Ken McCusick saying goodbye. We'll talk to you next week on One Last Thing.